Let's talk about Humbaba the Terrible. So, Humbaba, which is listed in the Simon Necronomicon as Humwawa, is one of the abominations, and therefore he's in the Eurelia text. I got two cats around my computer right now, and it's about 5:50 in the morning, so it looks like we're going to be productive today and make some videos. So, yep. So, he's supposedly an immortal being, or was, raised by the sun god Utu, also known as Shamash, and he guarded the cedar forest in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And he was killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and so basically, Gilgamesh gave Humbaba 7 gifts to lower his defenses, and these were Gilgamesh's sister, Ma Tur, and then number 2 actually in the tablet is unlisted. Then flour, big shoes, tiny shoes, semi-precious stones, and a bundle of tree branches. So let's see what the Simon Necronomicon text says about Humwawa. The lord of the abominations is Humwawa of the south winds, whose face is a mass of the entrails of the animals and men. His breath is the stench of dung, and has been. Humwawa is the dark angel of all that is excreted and of all that sours. And as all things come to the time when they will decay, so also Humwawa is the lord of the future of all things that goes upon the earth. And any man's future years may be seen by gazing into the very face of this angel, taking care not to breathe the horrid perfume that is the odor of death. So, my own notes here. Humwala is described in other texts as being the face of a lion and has a scaly body. Come on, don't bump into my screen. He is capable of breathing fire, too. Humwala is the guardian of the sacred cedar forest where the Dingir live, and answers only to Enlil. His ability to divine the future is attributed to the entrails in his description, as the entrails of animals were used as a divinatory tool in the times of Mesopotamia. So, one of the things that's rather interesting is the aspect of entrails, which it is true they actually used to. I think they would cut open some livestock, and depending on how the entrails looked, they would use those as a divinatory tool, kind of in the same way today that we use like runes and tarot cards. Would you stop bumping the screen? You know, my cats have this. You know how they like rub their face against things to leave their scent on it. My cats have the habit of doing that to the corners of my laptop, and let me know if your cats do that. I don't know if it's just mine, and she'll just continue to roll over here. And hopefully she doesn't bump into the screen anymore if she behaves at nearly 6 o'clock in the morning. The interesting thing with the divinatory aspect, right? So if you're thinking entrails, right, we're talking about like intestines, and those are very long and very windy because they get packed in our gut or in the guts of mammals, right? So if you look at the sigil for Humwawa, which I'm not going to show, but and it's not upstairs. The book is back there. Inside joke. But if you look at the sigil, it's all squiggly lines, right? So that the very sigil that's used for Humwala in the Simon Necronomicon is very representative of those entrails. So staring into his face to divine the future, you could gaze at the sigil in order to divine the future. So you can invoke him using the ritual described in the Book of Calling and have his sigil on your altar. You have that question in your mind. You know, when in my videos on spellwork and such, I talk about having that one specific phrase, so you can have that one specific question to answer as you gaze at that sigil, and then through the effect of sensory deprivation by just gazing at that sigil and nothing else, mind's gates, let's say, will be open up to and be receptive to Humwawa's current, or as some people put it, or his energy, and then you can connect with him, and after, hopefully he likes the offerings and things that you give him, and then he might be able to answer that question for you. Now, whether or not you are in tune enough or whether or not he feels like answering is a whole another ball game. He's described as having the face of a lion in the tablets. One tablet, this is actually really interesting. So there's there's the everyday accepted story of Gilgamesh where Humbaba was a bad monster or whatever. But there's actually one tale. I'm gonna move you again, cat. So there's actually one version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or at least part of it, that talks about when Gilgamesh goes to the cedar forest to confront Humbaba. And so there's Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and they bring a whole host of other people with them. And they go into the cedar forest and they're like, "Oh, okay, we got to find Humbaba, but there's so many trees here." So they start knocking down all these trees, right? And this particular version, it actually kind of talks about Gilgamesh and Enkidu as the bad guys because they're knocking down the forest. It's anti-deforestation, it's anti-destruction of nature, and it portrays Humbaba as basically a benevolent good entity and Gilgamesh as the bad guy, right? And another interesting thing, Humbaba basically has a bunch of other animals at his disposal. So he's a nature deity, right? He's got monkeys and birds as his kind of as his court, right? So he can have monkeys and birds do things for him. So in this version, Enkidu actually doesn't help Gilgamesh, but instead, after Humbaba dies, Enkidu actually mourns him. One other interesting thing, right? Humbaba is protected by 7 cloaks or radiances, and these are kind of like, they were also listed somewhere else as 7 virtues. I wasn't able to find a listing of what those 7 virtues were, but those are the things that protect him from being hurt, and that's what Gilgamesh has to kind of get him to give up by giving him other gifts so Gilgamesh can actually kill Humbaba. Then he takes his head and sticks it in a leather bag and totes it around. And you can kind of get there's a parallel here between Humbaba and Medusa, right? Where staring into the face of this being will turn you to stone in one case or drive you mad in another case. So, Medusa turns you to stone, Humbaba shows you your future, shows you your death, and it drives you mad, right? Very interesting that Medusa has the snakes, which nobody likes, seriously. And then Humbaba has entrails, very long and stringy things, whether they're active and alive, like snakes, or just plain gross, like the entrails or intestines. So, upon Humbaba or right before Humbaba's killed, right, he curses Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and he's like, neither of you will outlive the other, basically cursing them. So when one dies, the other one dies. So neither of them are going to live very long. So let's talk about why Humbaba died in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So Shamash actually helped Gilgamesh to kill Humbaba by paralyzing him with several winds. Now, in a lot of different stories and things, winds are very negative and paralyzing that are used in a lot of negative context. So that's why Shamash or Utu uses them to paralyze Humbaba. But the whole idea around Humbaba dying was so Gilgamesh could basically prove to people that these big beings, these entities, deities, gods, are mortal just like the rest of us. And the big motif in the Epic of Gilgamesh is this struggle between mortality and immortality. So Gilgamesh sets out trying to figure out a way to become immortal, and actually by the end of it, he does find the a flower that is able to make him immortal, but then he ends up by mistake losing it and then just becoming comfortable with his own mortality. So killing Humbaba demonstrates that even those things that are immortal, supposedly, can die. And Gilgamesh understands that life is just what it is. And after this big, giant adventure, he becomes comfortable with the idea of, hey, my life is not exactly going to last forever, but I had an amazing time while doing it. Now, let's remember that all of the stories that were ever told in a religious or spiritual context, a lot of scholars agree that they are to teach us a lesson. And the big lesson in Gilgamesh and the more specifically here, killing Humbaba, has to do with coming to terms with one's own mortality. Even these beings that we think of as being omnipresent and lasting forever, being that they are gods, they are weak in certain ways, just like the rest of us. So basically, everything and everyone has their time. And that being said, that's what Humbaba can show us when we work with him. He's able to divine our future and can tell us when we are no longer going to be in this plane on this form. Make that transition, pass on, perish, die, what have you. And this can drive a lot of people, the idea behind this can drive a lot of people mad. I mean, let's talk in the comments or even on my Facebook group. Let's, you guys can connect on there and we can have a whole discussion about this. What would you feel like? How would it affect your life if you knew that your time was limited? I mean, there's a lot of different movies. I forgot the title of it, but there's this one movie where people have like a little clock on their arm that shows them how much time they have left, and the big struggle is about earning more time. And you know people that have illnesses or people that are getting up there in age, as my dad likes to say, what how do you think it feels to them knowing that time is limited? I mean, as a kid growing up, you don't gain a proper concept of death until like 11 or 12, I think the research says. And even until you become an adult, you really think that you're immortal, basically. Or if you go through any scary experience, like I've listened to a truckload of scary stories on YouTube where people think, they have that whole kid concept of I'm invincible, nothing can happen to me, that happens to everybody else. And then they get that big shock of, wow, that was really close. You know, the idea that stuff comes to an end can really make you appreciate what you have in the moment. The idea of understanding that, like, you know, it doesn't matter what you do in this life, we all leave it. Everything is on loan anyway, as Stephen King says. Um, just the idea that nothing is permanent. What does that feel to you? What does that make you think about? That is extremely interesting. And that goes along with, you can get very philosophical about this. If we are only here for a certain amount of time, what is the point of being here? So Humaba really teaches or tries to teach us to get the idea and the perspective of what do we want to do with this time that we have. If we know that it could end a week from now, tomorrow, 5 minutes, what would you do with that time? So Humbaba can be very, very, very philosophical to work with and think about, and just get you to, in my mind, appreciate the present. Because and there's big philosophies around this. If you have regrets and stuff, you're living in the past. If you have anxiety, you're living in the future. So live in the present. That's what Gilgamesh learned, which was it's not in the destination, it's in the journey. So, yeah, man, I just got very philosophical. So let me know what you guys think about this. Let's start a discussion either in the comments or in the Facebook group and or both about what you guys think of Humbaba and that big lesson that he can teach us about mortality and what we do with our time. You guys can email me and check out my Facebook page, check out my Facebook group, check out my books and all that stuff, and look forward to the next video that I make probably this morning. Good hunting. Thanks for watching my video. So if you want to check out my playlists, I have, among others, the Simon Necronomicon, the Tree of Life, General Magic, Tulpamancy, a playlist on my books, the elements, stones, the theories that govern magic, and the gods and goddesses of Mesopotamia. If you want to check out my books on Amazon, I have Creating Consciousness, Magical Mechanics, Magical Theater, Handy Sigil Magic, Magical Movement, which is an update and expansion upon Handy Sigil Magic, Magical Mastery, which is a combination masterwork of Magical Theater and Magical Mechanics, and The Guide to the Spheres and Beyond. You can also find me on Facebook at Magickology YT. You can email me at priestofthenecro@gmail.com, and you can even check out my Instagram, which is Magickology. And good hunting.